That's what bouncing around your own head feels like.
Exactly that. Right, for this, turn that so the thing points
How
to
do
you.
I not?
That's worrying.
How
it's
was
a little
I not
worrying.
doing that?
A little worrying.
So I thought it would be fun to start what could be a potential series talking about comedians that we both love but have slipped through the net of the YouTube channel. Sean Locke was pretty close to the top of my list in terms of comedians I have somehow never mentioned, but I was completely obsessed and think he is a unique genius voice in global comedy.
I'm kind of shocked that it hasn't come up a little bit, because when I see you write and perform and stuff, I think there's a lot of Lockisms in what you do. So
100%.
I'm surprised it hasn't come out in an analytics video.
Yeah, it's a really funny thing. I used to watch 8 out of 10 Cats before it went to Countdown. At school, I'd watch the episodes just over and over again. I probably watched the first 13 seasons of 8 out of 10 Cats 5 or 6 times.
Wow.
When I was 17, 18 years old.
That's what was that culturally. England is like it's a panel show country. Like our comedy consumption is 99% panel shows for some reason, and then we'll go and maybe see one of them live. Imagine that. The panel show whole thing is you don't have to worry about tuning in. It's always there. It's always there. Don't worry about it. Tune in. Enjoy it, then forget about it. And then I'm just imagining you watching it like some people watch The Wire. like poring over every frame and joke. Just be like, well, I think season 3 was technically a masterpiece, but after that it really did.
Cinematography was...
The way they captured Jimmy Carr's receding hairline over many years.
It goes back and then like the tide, it's come back forward again.
So you got obsessed with 8 out of 10 Cats. What in particular drew you to that show as opposed to all of the other panel shows that you did have access to?
It was literally Sean Locke.
Yeah.
It was the way he could almost break the panel show as you were watching it, be a completely chaotic, unpredictable element, but still somehow work within the show. Mm-hmm. Watching him be able to just mess around and do seemingly whatever he wanted, and for the show to still move forward.
What do you think kids are most scared of?
Well, in our house, it's Mr. Jangles, which is one of the characters I play.
Who is Mr. Jangles, Sean?
Mr. Jangles comes up the stairs! You better be in bed! Before Mr. Jangles gets up there!
Everybody's scared, Sean. That's just not
We're all
getting a bit
scared
panicky.
now.
I'm afraid that's the end of the show because we have to go to bed now.
I didn't do it, really. It was a joke. I don't terrify my children as Mr. Jangles. Say that now.
What's he called then?
Ron.
Ron, coming up the stairs.
Ron. No, it's just... Ron's here.
And weirdly, that's more terrifying than Mr. Jangles.
And that was one of the first times for me where I was like, oh, I could maybe do comedy.
Interesting. So for you, it was about finding surrealism represented on screen. And that ticked your box of, I think like that. I can do that.
Yeah.
That's so weird. Mine was the exact other way. It was seeing people who were like playing with the room, as it were. So like when I would watch Sean Locke, and I like you was obsessed with his presence on TV, especially out of 10 Cats. He was amazing. But I would always look at him as, I'll never be able to do that. Sean Locke was this figure of just like, well, that's clearly a genius, and we don't touch genius. But then I would look at people who, to be fair, I do now think of as geniuses. But at the time, I would watch people like Dara O'Brien and Ross Noble, who were conversational and working with the room and improvisatory. And I thought, oh, that I can do. That's fine. That gave me that inspiration. Sean Locke was the other way of like, no, comedians are for the special. Like, comedy is for the special people, and I shouldn't touch it.
Wow.
To some extent.
What, so do you think you were more like an MC or something?
I don't know. I distinctly remember the first time I thought I should do comedy. I was always obsessed with it growing up. But we went to go and see Dara O'Brien when I was about 14 or 15 or so. And he was in the middle of a bit. And I remember he said a line. And the first thing my brain did instead of laughing was go, I wouldn't have taken it there. Like, it was this really a weird out-of-body experience of just me. It wasn't quite critiquing it because it was still good, but it just was noting that my path was going left and he went right. Mm-hmm. And I was realizing I was jumping off a premise. And it felt collaborative and fresh and improvisatory. Then when I would see people like Sean Locke, it would be like, well, that's something that someone's written down and honed and perfected, and I can't do that. It was finding people that were, like, that they felt like human beings speaking and blurting out loud, and they happened to be hilarious doing it.
That's such an because I always felt that about Sean Locke. When I have comedians that I have an overlap with in terms of what I consider myself doing on stage, is when your brain is kind of alive and they're talking about things and you're going like, oh, they could do that or they could do this.
Yeah.
And when you're watching comedians, at least for me, and my brain is kind of dead, it means like, this is great comedy, but it's just not the way my brain thinks of comedy.
To get into Sean Locke in a second, I think that's kind of a superpower, is all of his premises make you go, he could go 5 different places with this. And you're trying to work it out, and that's part of the game. He will always surprise you and always do the 6th option out of 5, if that makes sense. Whereas, like, I mean, McIntyre, for example, back in the day in the 2005 era, you would see the premise and, like, the joke would still be well constructed and you would still laugh, but you weren't playing the game. You know, they would do the premise and you'd be like, well, let's see what he does with this. You're not trying to outwit them or get anywhere with it, so you kind of... you fall off it. You're right. Your brain is dead. It's not alive and jumping around.
It's like watching McIntyre follow a great recipe.
Yes. No, it's exactly that. You've ended up with a beautifully baked cake, but at no point are you surprised that a cake has come out of the oven.
Yeah. Whereas Sean is like combining weird flavors and it's like, what are you doing? Putting coconut milk in there? And it's like...
At no point has he used any flour. So you're like, I don't even know what he's making. Flapjacks? Are we doing flapjacks?
But then you take a bite and it's like, this is delicious.
This is the best thing I've ever done. And then he calls you a cunt and he leaves. Like, it's constantly surprising, and you're always attempting to play along. Where is this premise going to end up? And it's never where you think. Like, he'll always either go extremely surreal or extremely mundane, and you don't know which route he's going to pick until we're there. And you just kind of get swept up in it.
Because some people really care, don't they? Some people, every single piece of environmental news mortifies them, like the ice caps are melting, sea levels are rising. The samba button on a Yamaha organ uses 10 times more energy than any other rhythm. Turn it off!
I think one of the big mysteries about Sean Locke is his persona, and there's unique things about him that other comedians can't do. Like, the kind of thing I arrived on is that he's like Jack D combined with the Mighty Boosh.
I can kind of see that, because he's got that, like, almost offbeat jazz rhythm of Boosh, of, like, he falls on the wrong syllables. He, like, kind of arrives at punchlines at the wrong time. And then, like, the surrealist turns are always midway through delivery. But he's got the grumpy old man face of Jack D enough that you expect the trials and tribulations of a middle-aged man to come tumbling out of his mouth. With the Mighty Boosh in particular is a really good example of that, because I've chatted with Greg Curzon. I love a lovely comedian, lovely comedy boy, who, like, we've sat there. He's not dead.
I'll go put a photo there.
Okay, I thought you were like, pour one out, Greg.
That's for you, Greg.
It's okay, buddy.
You're a good egg, mate.
We miss you. Basically, we've talked about the Mighty Boosh a lot and what makes their dynamic work as absurdism, and we kind of narrowed it down to this idea that in any routine, it's not straight man and absurd man. It is grounded person and absurd person. They're always yes-anding and furthering the joke, but one is grounded in logistics and the other person is answering with absurdism. It's always just sort of like, oh, here I come with my spongy bread feet. And then, like, that's the absurd, like, offer. And then the other person in the sketch has to be like, spongy bread feet, how'd you buy shoes for those? They're grounding it immediately in logistics, and that person then has to answer and be like, I'll go to a special bread shoe store. And they, like, have to, like, have this back and, oh yeah, bread shoe store, where'd you find that? It's in the shopping centre in Leicester. You have to go through a bread passage or something. And you're like, they
Down through the bread tunnel.
Yeah, exactly that. It's like, oh, the bread tunnel, yeah, is that next to that's next to the boots, isn't it? Like, yes, next to the boots. Like, they have this constant back and forth where it's insanely absurd and then boom, grounded in pure mundanity to, like, almost anchor the absurdism to make it funnier.
You heard what he said, though. You're not going to open it, are you?
Oh, no, I would never do that.
On the contrary.
As soon as he is gone, I shall open the box, and all of its contents will be mine.
I better stay here, then.
Sean Locke is like both of those things in every premise. It's always an anchored idea that absurdism springs out of. And the anchoring is what makes the absurd so weird. When you watch comics like Rob Orton or like Milton Jones or anyone that's kind of dipping into surrealism full force, like they are going in and every premise is, when I was on the moon the other day, and you're like, well, okay, no, this is real.
Yeah.
This is fine. But Sean Locke is always, well, you know, I fucking hate recycling. At no point are you assuming that's going to become a surrealist, like, dive into, like, you aren't expecting the mad imagery because it starts in such a grounded place.
Yes.
You know?
I think, like, one of the first great jokes I heard of his that just broke my brain a little bit was when he's talking about a cat, and he's like, you know, when you pick up a cat, they always get longer, don't they? And he just does this mime of the cat, he's lifting it up further and further, and he says, and then you're on the upstairs window, and you're kind of like dangling it around.
So, I mean, you can have a lot of fun with cats. I did have a cat for a short period of time, and the thing I used to like doing with this, you know, when you pick a cat up by its sort of front legs, and you just hold it for a bit, they get longer and longer. Yeah, they do. And if you hold them, you can really stretch them out. You can start swinging them. I had to go up the upstairs window and have them out on the street.
It never feels forced. It never feels pushed. And I think kind of some of that is that grounding. Like, it's the second floor window. It's not the skyscraper. It's not the moon. It's not space or whatever. Mm-hmm. It is still, I live in a 2 up, 2 down in Hackney kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Like, it's very much just like, I can see him through the upstairs bathroom. Like, you are making it grounded.
It's the same thing as, like, Bob Mortimer, where it's like working to middle-class surrealism, where the wackiness is always grounded in the same way the Bouchard with, like, boots or mundane things, which makes it not crazy but believable in the brain.
Yeah.
Which is why I find it so funny, is because it's so believable. Because he's stretched reality not to breaking point, but just to the cusp.
Yeah.
It's like, this is just making sense in my brain, and that's what gets me to, like, keel over laughing.
You've hit on something really important there, because you mentioned that it starts with an observation and then it seamlessly shifts into that kind of surreal thing. It's almost like he's playing with that classic observational joke structure of, you get a laugh of recognition, you get a laugh of extrapolation, and then you get a laugh of extremism. So, like, with a normal observational routine, you'll say, like, God, what's with fridges? And everyone goes, fuck, I've got a fridge. And then they do a little fridge laugh. And then the next one is, like, the laugh of extrapolation. Whenever you open it, oh, goodness me, it's always empty, isn't it? No matter what you've bought, you could have bought a whole shop and it's empty, isn't it? And then it's like, they're playing with logic, and it obviously doesn't happen, but we've extrapolated, that's fine. And then the final version of that is they go to extremes. And then they will do some joke about how you, like, put a loaf of bread in the fridge and watch it vanish in real time or something. And that's like it's enough to elicit that almost like applause response of, we've hit the logical endpoint of that joke, off we go. What I feel like he does is do that observational mantra of make an observation and take it to an absurd place. And he just skips all of the stepping stones.
Yes.
Like, he literally knows that audiences know the feel and rhythm of an observational joke enough that he can do a bit of observational material and then immediately take it to the final point without having to do the journey. And that's what makes it not feel hack. When you see someone do the stepping stones, you're like, okay, fine, I see what's going on. You immediately whiplash to the final thing. You're like, oh my God, this is insane. I would never have imagined getting there.
It sort of seemed to appear suddenly about 10 years ago, this excitement about Halloween. I grew up, there was no even mention of it. You know,
it was just
regular. There were satanic rituals that we go to, and
satanic rituals and then
animals and the youngest boy child of the village. We wouldn't call it Halloween in those days. They were very much about our Lord Satan and thanking him for a year of evil. But suddenly, thank you, brethren. I'll see you at the next lodge meeting. I'll be wearing the golden hooves.
I mean, we've both read Adam Bloom's book.
Oh, yeah, get it up. We need a visual of it to plug it.
Get it up for the Bloom. This hasn't been sponsored by Adam Bloom. It's just a great book.
But also, Adam, if you are watching, please do send us money. We need it really badly. I've bought 2 copies of your book, and frankly, I can't afford that.
Send us money through your self-published book.
I know we gave you the money. If you could just give it back, that would be so handy. I really need it, Adam. I really need it. We've got examples. He's citing his sources.
We do. So Adam Bloom calls this reality bridging, and I'm just going to read this chunk. An example of a comedian who skillfully broke this rule was Sean Locke. He would manage to go from doing a routine that's based on a genuine opinion to gradually telling a fantastical story that was inspired by his original train of thought. He built what I call reality bridges, a gradual change from being in a believable place and then merging into fantasy without there being a noticeable join.
The worst ones are the swan-based pubs, aren't they? God, dear. Then you've got 2 pictures of a swan up. Underneath, it says Cobs and Pens. I have the foggiest idea. I'll stare at the picture looking for a clue. Breasts or a penis, anything. A thicker forewing, come on. I didn't want to burst in case it was a swan's toilet. You know how bad-tempered they can be. You upset one having a piss, he'll break both your arms.
I'm not sure if you noticed this, but a lot of the way that I think he gets away with his like jumps to absurdism is actually performance quirks. How would you describe Sean Locke's face?
Elastic?
Elastic is definitely a part of it. What's his resting face like if you picture Sean Locke in your mind?
Serious, fed up, curmudgeonly.
Yes, absolutely. You mentioned Jack D earlier. There's put upon bitter pub-dwelling man, like furrowed brows, always like this, constantly like this. And he always delivers his setups like this, pretty much always like this. God, you've noticed, haven't you, when you've got to do the recycling? Oh, I hate it. And then when he has to go absurd and he wants to make that bridge, he goes, ah. He pulls it back to this wide eye and he does this Green Goblin smile of just like, because, you notice, don't you, when you do the boxes, ah, and he just pulls it back. And no matter what he says with that face on, you almost are telegraphed immediately that we're going somewhere weird, don't worry about it.
Sean, what do you think the best invention of all time?
It's got to be the hat, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, before the hat, what people had to endure.
That's very ladylike, Claudie. Enjoy that night.
She's just about to tan herself.
Anything coming from the sky, generally, if you live on this planet for a while, anything that comes from the sky is bad. It's rain, it's sun, it's wind. Sometimes it's like anvils, if you're in a cartoon. You need a special hat for that one. It's got to be the hat.
Jimmy Carr spoke in that interview with Stuart Goldsmith that why Sean Locke worked as well as he did was because of the way he looked, at least in part, because he looks like a builder.
Because of the way Sean looked. Like, if Sean turned up at your house and said, I'm here to fix your boiler, come right through, I'll make you a cup of tea, I imagine you take 5 sugars. He had the look of a working man, right? So but he was doing this very delicate sort of flight of fancy, surreal comedy. So it's funny as fuck is exactly right. So he had this thing where everything was heightened because it was so left field.
Yeah.
But he also has the ability to snap out of that, face widen, leap into these surreal things, and then almost like a goofy, chaotic spirit is channeling through him temporarily, and then it sucks back into him, and he recedes back into premise mode.
That's exactly that, yeah. It's this constant oscillation from, like... It's almost like there's a comedy theory of, like, the protected self versus the unprotected self. Of that idea of the protected self is almost never what you want to show on stage, because it's boring. It's who you are at work. It's who you are with important people that you can't possibly show vulnerability to. Your unprotected self is the weird, silly, bizarre, goofball human that you are. And when we go and see comedy, we want to see the unprotected self. That's interesting. That's cool and neat and novel. Wow, that person's talking about wanking. We shouldn't do that. But what you've described there is really interesting because it almost feels like a faux version of his protected self when he's doing this that then leaves him as he gets carried away and excited. And as his protected self gets kind of lost in the bit, the unprotected self comes out, the eyes widen, the smile broadens, his weird elastic forehead bunches up as it goes up his head, and it sells everybody on the bit to the point where we just go with him. And it's such an important facet. I think if he was delivering all of his bits as well written and immaculately thought out as they are, if he delivered them like Jack D, they would not work.
I've been round there, I've been Gordon Brown. He's got a log flume in his bedroom. Brilliant. He said, come on, Sean. I said, I'm voting for you, Gordon. This is brilliant. And then he gave me a big hot dog, biggest one I've ever seen. He said, you could have ice cream on it if you want. I went, and he said, don't use the toilet, just wet yourself. I went,
I prefer Sean Locke on panel shows as opposed to his stand-up.
Yeah.
Because I think in his stand-up, he can lean into the curmudgeonly, cynical guy a little too hard, and then he doesn't hit the whimsy as hard as I think he does in the panel shows. And that's what really, his goofing around, his messing around, his being free and just being a nuisance is really what makes me laugh. And I think he just maybe gets a bit restricted.
I don't think you're wrong there. I agree personally that I always preferred him on panel shows. I remember loving his stand-up. I went to see him a few times and I loved it. But at the same time, you're right, there's something about his panel show appearances that are so unrestricted. We were talking about this a few weeks ago, this idea that actually in stand-up, he has to do the boring stuff. He has to do the legwork, the premises. He has to lay the groundwork of the logic of a bit before he gets to take off and fly. And in the panel shows, he has 6 people to do that for him.
Yeah.
You know, Jimmy is doing the statistics and the premise at the top. Someone jumps in with a, place to take the bit, a world that the bit takes place in.
Yeah.
And he just gets to immediately jump to stage 9. He gets to do his reality bridging moment, but they've done all of the legwork to do stages 1, 2, and 3.
His persona on panel shows is more heightened, immediately more wacky because he's not having to lug premises around, because he's not having to do all this groundwork, foundation work. He is just kind of free, which I think is what he always kind of wanted to be, was just kind of like the kooky, weird guy on the corner who gets to chime in every now and again and say something hilarious and then recede back into the shadows while everyone else does the boring stuff.
I don't think you're wrong.
Hosting, you've done hosting stuff as well. You had your show, TV Heaven, Telly Hell.
Yeah.
You hosted Have I Got News For You as well. Do you like doing that? Do you like kind of being in charge?
Not really.
No?
Not really. Pain in the arse, really. I'd do it, but it wouldn't be my choice.
Right.
I'd just sit around and make smart-ass comments from sidelines. That's my ideal world, really.
Is
Sitting there going... Just sitting there waiting and then just saying something funny and then everyone looks at you for a bit and then they leave you alone.
If we're talking about persona, there's an interesting part of the persona that I don't think we've touched on yet, which in panel shows, he still leans into a bit, but in stand-up, it's hugely prevalent of that, like, he's the guy in the pub. He is so rooted in, like, working-class Britain's language and the way they talk about their own society. It's always pub-centric. The first thing on his mind is a pint. He is always grounded in this mundanity. He'll talk about grout probably too often. Like, he's always got that middle-aged man of like, he's just a bloke. He's just a bloke. He's just a bloke.
Yeah.
And that heightens that level of wackiness and weirdness. And in panel shows, like, it's still there, but that disconnect isn't quite as present to some extent because he just gets to be bizarre all of the time. And part of what I genuinely love about his stand-up is that a lot of his routines start as a pastiche of hacky material. Like, they start so Peter Kay, and he knows it. There's a little twinkle in his eye where he's going like, I know this is shit, but don't worry.
Give me a minute.
Yeah. Like, there's a clip that you sent me from the panel show where you thought he was almost deriding what one of the broader comics was going to be doing.
Yeah.
Why did you think that? I'm intrigued, because I agree. What gave it away?
That clip just encapsulated what's so magic about Sean Locke. And Jason is the other co-host. He's talking about, like, grunting should be banned in Wimbledon. And I can tell he's about to go into some, like, hack. Oh, but I love the grunting in tennis. And, I grunt when I get my chips off because,
That's what I do when I go get my Gregs.
Yeah. When I reach over for the TV remote, that's when And before Jason can get into that, and then Sean Locke just goes, I know how you can stop them grunting. Shoot them. just get some blind bloke who shoots pigs for a living, and whenever he hears anything, just go...
I'd like it if, as the roof closed, the ground opened up. And all the crowd fell in.
I like the grunting, though. That's where they earn their money, don't they? The grunting, which they're trying to ban.
How can you ban grunting?
Shoot them. A blind bloke who normally hunts pigs, like that, sitting there, and he hears a...
Oh, it's so magic because it shits on Jason. He doesn't mean to, and then it takes the joke in the most surreal, random, unexpected direction, and it's so just reliant on his imagination, and it's not complying to, like, these joke structures or, like, the idea that jokes need to sound a certain way.
No, absolutely. I think, you're right. It's almost in direct defiance to jokes that have prescriptive rhythm. So when earlier I was talking about that observational thing of that, recognition, escalation, and extrapolation, whatever, that kind of thing, we all know the rhythm of that so well that it's so easy to deride and just fall off of. And I feel like he hates it and is in direct defiance of it.
And that was something that I was very envious of. You know, I could make the audience laugh, but how do you get the comics to laugh? And he just had that.
Have you listened to his most recent special, Keep It Light?
Yeah.
There's a bit in there that almost lays this bare of when he's doing like nostalgia bait comedy, but like a parody of it. You go, you all remember Walnut Whip? Oh, do we all remember a walnut? I mean, he's hamming up so much that it's clear he fucking despises it so much.
You just get a walnut, right? Didn't you? You get a bit of thread, same colour as the nuts, tie it around the nut, and then you leave it on the pavement, wouldn't you?
And then he almost gives us this sort of refutation of that style of comedy by Sean Locking it. So he does a few examples. Back in the day, we'd get a walnut whip, wouldn't we, for a tuppence? We loved it. We loved it. There's no joke. There's no nothing. And people are laughing that he hates it. And it's clearly this thing. And then he goes like, because, back in my day, do you remember what we'd do? Do you remember what we'd do when we would just, steal an accordion? You know when we'd find an accordion, you couldn't move for them back then, could you? Yeah, what we do is we'd steal an accordion, wouldn't we? And we'd fill it with sand.
So you couldn't close it. And then we used to, excuse me a minute. We used to leave by the bus depots, because a lot of the bus drivers were in folk groups, weren't they? And they'd come off their shift and go, look, lovely accordion there, that's handy. And they'd pick it up and they couldn't close it, because they would go, I can't close the accordion.
And he's still using the rhythm that he's deriding so much, but he's suffused it with so much imagination that it's almost him going, if you're fucking gonna do it like this, to some extent, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And you can tell in any of his specials or when he's on panel, if he does a joke, he can't help but he'll go like, whoop, whoop, or he'll do a little tap dance or something. Because he's going I know this is a typical regular joke and it's not what I want to do.
Absolutely.
This is not me as a comedian. This is me, crazy comedian Sean Locke, telling a joke.
Yeah, this is me understanding that, it's almost this high status move of, this is what you want, isn't it?
You should live life to the full, shouldn't you? Like, my dad's 84, just learnt Chinese. That's amazing, isn't it? It's 84, he's just learnt Chinese. Well, I hope so. We only got him a single ticket.
I find that so fascinating when he's doing grounded, relatable premises. If he feels like it's being too hacky, he hams up the performance. He struts around the stage. He kind of McIntyres and Peter Kay's it to some extent. There's almost an Americanism about him. He affects this bravado with this wink that this is wank, isn't it? He's immediately got this sentiment of just I deride this, and it's necessary for where we're going. So if we're going to have to talk about relatable issues for me to make my comedy soar, I at least have to make the grounding in my voice. And that voice is that cynicism that you mentioned, right? There is an element of cynicism to Sean Locke, and he lets it come out in how he thinks about jokes and other people's material sometimes, I think.
I can see a few people looking at me as if to say, how long's this going on for? I believe you can go on for a while. That's the funny bit, really, isn't it, that? The rest of it's bollocks, but that bit is... I don't want to push it, but, it is.
How do you feel like that relates to how we as an audience perceive his persona? Because I think we've nailed down a few elements of it, but we haven't really gone, his persona is X. And I think part of the reason why I've struggled with this sort of as a research assignment is reading theory and text about comedy. Everyone gives examples of really clean personas. And they go, Jack D is grumpy. Persona, locked in, done, right? Sean is so hard to make sense of.
Yeah.
To some extent, you always have to build a character for him. You can't just say he is X, he is Y, he is...
He's custom made.
Yes, exactly. He's a bespoke comic kind of thing. There's that clip in 8 out of 10 Cats where he's doing a bit about it, and it's brilliant because he's delivering it so deadpan, but I also think it's weirdly poignant about, I think, his persona and his style of comedy.
But really, I don't think a dictionary's got enough words in it to describe me. You know, I think I'm such an amazing, complicated. I'm more like a sensation, an idea.
Yeah.
I mean, the best way to describe me is with a fragrance. You'd smell it and you go, that's Sean Locke. You'd smell it. It'd be like hot tarmac and a vet's flannel.
And I was like, yeah, no, exactly that.
Yeah.
You know him when you see him. Like, he is a complete persona. And I think he's so... Whenever we talk about persona, we always talk about, can you hear it in their voice or not? And I think if you can, there's a clear persona on display. And Sean Locke has that in spades. But if I can define it, I'll be damned. I have no idea how to pin that down.
Yeah, I remember watching those clips and, like, you see Sean Locke doing these bits, and it's so kind of nice and kind of funny to see him throughout the years performing next to what became really successful American comedians. In that bit you talked about, he's next to Trevor Noah. There's another bit where he's next to Hannibal Buress.
Yeah.
And they're kind of looking at him bemused, dumbfounded a little bit. Like, they don't really understand where he's coming from comedically.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's like, sometimes even bored. Sometimes they're looking at this man of like, you aren't obeying any of the rules and rhythms I expect, therefore I just sort of don't expect funny from you.
Yeah,
it's almost
like you can't do comedy.
Yeah, definitely. There is that element of, I don't want to prescribe that on those people. I think they're probably broad, open-minded people, but there's internal biases in the back of their heads, especially if you gig in New York 5 days a week and you're doing 25 shows a week and you're only hearing the same New York rhythm over and over and over and over again. Then if you hear Sean Locke just sort of go like, I don't think I'd like to be a swan, I'd like to gander. I think only gooses can gander. Like, you would think you've lost your mind.
Yeah.
Like, how is this man on British television?
Yeah.
When you were mentioning that, I kind of had a bit of a flash. I think almost American comics perceive Sean sort of in the same way that a lot of British comics perceive Norm Macdonald. Norm is this strange, otherworldly outlier that relies on the knowledge and rhythm of that culture and subverts it a bit. So I find a lot of British comics don't like Norm. They don't get it. They don't understand why it works.
Interesting.
And I sort of feel it goes the other way from Americans back to Sean Locke. Unless you've grown up knowing a guy in the pub that feels like Sean, you don't know that rhythm. You don't understand that rhythm and why it feels eccentric and weird and lovable and interesting. It just feels like a man who can't do comedy.
Yeah.
And
it's extremely poignant that they both died in the same year.
Was it the same year?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It was pretty brutal, but it's both two really unique voices that can't be replaced.
What's your favourite script song?
There's so many to choose from.
What's your favourite script song?
It's so hard, isn't it, to choose your favourite script song? I mean, there's that one. Joke, show us your cock and I'll give you Or there's, I'll be up your flue in a minute or two and the news is just made it. There's a hole in the front. That one.
Are they even Scottish?
When he's on 8 out of 10 Cats Does Countdown, I feel like the show restricts him a bit too much. There's not enough time for him to go down these surreal avenues and play to his strengths because he's confined within the numbers games and the whatever of the show.
The countdown version of it, it's even easier. That's even easier because actually half the show you're just playing stupid word puzzles. Nobody can write any material for that show. Apart from the opening gag where you have like a sort of mascot. That's it.
I massively agree. There's also, I think, something to be said for the fact that the countdown element has Dictionary Corner, and their whole gambit as a production team was Dictionary Corner is where we place the alt comedians. This is where we'll do character acts, musical acts, people who are unabashedly surreal all of the time. And it means that Sean Locke looks middle of the road by comparison, because you've got a man dressed head to toe in spandex doing musical numbers on a ukulele.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, yeah, Sean Locke is now a man in a pub compared to that.
Yeah, I never thought of that, but that's so true. I think he felt a bit confined. And there's that clip of him where he's pretending to be a polar bear and he's like, I'm going back and forth. Why do I have to play Countdown? Why do I have to play Countdown?
I won't lie to you. I don't like doing Countdown. Why lie? What's the point of lying? I feel like a polar bear trapped in a tiny cage. Up and down, up and down. Why do I have to play Countdown? Why do I have to play Countdown? Why? No, but seriously, I hate playing Countdown.
And I think that is true, genuine comedic. That's his own genuine feelings.
Yeah.
And there are moments where he does get an opportunity to riff and kind of go for it. and he won a previous episode of Countdown, and he was saying, I celebrated, I took a bath in alphabeti spaghetti, and I stood up, and there's underpass, and my ass crack. And he says, it's just what surprised me is that there's 2 S's, which is very rare. This is great, surreal, whimsical bit.
Yeah.
And
then grounded in the logistics of what you expect out of a can of alphabeti Pescetti, apparently.
Pescetti, pistachio, yeah. But then John leaps in and he goes like, it's not much of a bath if you only have 1 can of spaghetti. And then that gets the biggest laugh of the audience. But you can see Sean look around like...
He like bristles.
He's like, for God's sake, I'm trying to have fun and you guys can't help but put these jokes and kind of box things and use your logic joke brains to undercut the whimsy that I'm creating in the room.
I did the thing that I always do when I win Countdown, which is I have a bath in alphabeti spaghetti. And I thought I'd drive myself off, but when I bent over and caught a glimpse, I had a 9-letter word in the crack of my arse. And it was underpass. It's very rare in a tin of alphabeti spaghetti to get 2 S's. That's what really freaked me out.
It's not really much of a bath in alphabeti spaghetti if you only use 1 tin, is it?
What made him so good on panels is that he's surrounded by more traditional joke tellers. There are very few comedians who create the chaos Sean does in those rooms.
Yeah.
And so the moments when he feels restricted are the moments where you can see his soul leave his body a little bit.
OK, fingers on buzzers, you're playing
Jimmy,
for
there's
dignity.
A woman there not clapping. The woman in the green top, she's not clapping. That's better. We've done well. We've been trying hard. I've seen better countdowns.
OK.
Don't wear a green jumper and not clap. That's what I'm saying. If you're not going to clap, wear a brown jumper like the fella in front.
Yes, green, famously not a good colour for camouflage.
Yeah. What's in a TV studio, Jimmy, actually? Mr. I could very so quickly say something which people might laugh at.
I think it would be a nice time to talk about, because in the Jimmy Carr interview, he talked about realising that him and Sean Locke had been in a double act for 20 years. And it's something that isn't immediately obvious.
There's a part of Sean that's kind of was a father figure. He was 10 years older than me, and he was an incredibly important figure in my life. And it wasn't until he died, really, that I acknowledged that I was sort of in a double act on TV. With him, we did like over 250 TV shows together.
Yeah, because Jimmy is like, not only can he supply the premises, he's got the extreme one-liner quick wit. So Sean can supply these flurries of comic inspiration that are raw and need to be shaped. And then Jimmy, in the moment, can add jokes and put punchlines and give it a bit of structure. But it's all down to Sean. He's like the tornado of hilarity that comes into the room, and then Jimmy is able to sculpt it or contain it in a way.
Heston, you must have met some celebrity chefs in your time. Who do you think sexiest?
Yeah, loads. You looking at me, Jimmy?
No, Heston. I did say Heston at the beginning of
Why
that.
are you looking at me, then?
Well, because you just said, are you looking at me?
Was it?
I stared over there. That seems perfectly natural.
Well, I mean, make your mind up. Who you asking the question to? You asking Heston or me?
When I said Heston...
There's no point using his name and then looking at me. You're still looking at me. Stop looking at me.
This is like a fight in a pub. Are you looking at me? Who are you looking at?
He is this sort of unknowable force that needs tethering to some extent. I think Jimmy Carr gets a lot of flack for sometimes correct reasons, for sometimes incorrect reasons. I'm not an amazing fan of him, but I respect a lot of what he does. But on panel shows, he was the face of UK panel shows for 20 years for a reason. I don't know if there's anyone better at what he does than that. And I think all the way he interacts with Sean is so poignant for that, because when he sees a riff and he sees an idea, he doesn't shut it down or get it back on the rails or listen to the producer in the ear. He just goes like, Why would you say that, Sean? Like, he gives the question, he gives the offer almost for him to jump off.
Because he knows the more you get Sean to do, the more he's going to give you. This is not a well that's going to run dry. It just goes deeper and deeper and gets weirder. It's like that Assange bit where he's giving names for Julian Assange. And it's like he gives 2, and then Jimmy's just relentless. He's like, what else does it sound like, though, Sean? What else does it sound like?
Keep going.
Yeah, but what else does it sound like, Sean?
The surgeon would say, well, we've removed the prostate, now we just have to Assange the wound. They're like a part of France. We've bought a lovely place in the Assange.
What else does it sound like, though, Sean?
Assange. It sounds like that rash you get, right? The rash you can get if you wax your chest too quickly. If you're a footballer. And he's got a lot of Assange there, the skin's...
That's why I think panel shows brought the best out of him, because Jimmy is there and he's in an environment surrounded by comedians who want to push him and bring more out of him. I didn't say this quite right. It's not that comedians want to push Sean necessarily, but more how they respond to him. In so many of the clips, the comedians are the first ones to really laugh at what Sean is doing. I'll always love Mickey Flanagan for this. He's Sean Locke's biggest cheerleader. He is the first one to cackle at whatever Sean is doing and is the loudest in the room. Comedians often know how Sean is subverting or playing with their expectations before the audience does. And I think it's often the laughter and support of the comedians that signals the audience to get on board with what Sean is doing and encourages Sean to get wilder and wackier. When he's alone on the stand-up stage without the backing of other comedians, maybe Sean didn't have that encouragement to go a bit further, to get a bit wilder, and maybe the audience in turn were a little less supportive of his flights of fancy. It makes sense that Sean would play things a little safer, especially as he became more popular and his audience became more mainstream. More on that in a minute.
I always remember going and seeing his Lockopedia show. Do you know the premise of the Lockopedia show was that he had written an encyclopedia that had a joke about everything in it. And like talking about this now, it's very clear that he is deliberately wrong-footing the audience. It's obviously a premise that can't work, and he's playing with the fact that we know it shouldn't work and it can't work. But what it led to was quite a disappointing performance where people would yell stuff out and Sean would just go, oh, no, I don't have that one.
What letter would you like? B, please. What? B. For banana. For banana. B and banana. Can't go wrong with banana, can you? I mean, if I leave the house without any banana jokes, then I don't deserve to call myself a comedian, really, do I?
Do you get really stumped by them?
Yeah, of course,
ever?
always.
Yeah.
It's impossible to do. So what I do is it's how I get out of it, really. It's most audiences get it quite quickly that obviously I can't do it, and it's just me being ridiculous. But it just gets people involved in the show in a different way, changes it, and it goes off in different directions. And then I bring it back, and I can only do it if I had a really strong stand-up show.
It was profoundly disappointing. As like a teenager who loved Sean Locke and go to see him, and what felt like failure being presented to me for like an hour. My sister and I left that just like, was that shit? I feel like that was shit. That's so Sean Locke of him deliberately playing with the structure and feel of what a tour show should be. Probably to his detriment to some capacity.
Yeah, because I guess that targets his own improvisation ability.
Maybe that's what it was. Maybe he was trying to foster that level of chaos by having dynamic prompts that he can riff with.
But then he just maybe gave up. When, like, I don't want to use my brain or whatever. But in like Purple Van Man, there's a heckler that calls out and he creates this whole bespoke scenario and fog and like a kind of, grotesque figure. And it's hilarious and it's all come from the top of his head. So I don't know why. Maybe he didn't give himself permission, or maybe just the limit of having people yell out very specific things. That's when he needs someone else to take a bit of a hit to get the ball rolling, and then he can jump in and comment and take something a weird direction.
He's dressed up as a sort of drunken old mad cockney. I'll sneak in. I've heard about this routine. And then he'll just disappear into the fog like Jack the Ripper.
There's something we haven't really touched on, and that's his audience and his kind of success and his fame, I wonder if part of that is the more and more popular he got, the less and less of his people he was getting at his shows. We just watched a DVD where he was playing the Hammersmith Apollo. He was one of the biggest comedy legends in the whole country. And he straddled, comedy nerds love him, comedians love him, and the mainstream public adored him. Like, he was this enormous person in a similar way that James Acaster is now. He was just this person that no one had a bad word to say about. But it meant that going and seeing Sean Lock on tour you were surrounded by, like, the broadest of mainstream comedy fans. Like, that's the only show they'll see that year. Yeah. It's going and seeing their favourite comic from the funny telly show they like. And I wonder whether or not there is an element that he felt hamstrung by the people he was working with. If you're playing to a room of 3,000 people every night and 2,500 of that you don't trust that they'll jump with you,
yeah,
that's hard.
But I guess that first DVD, the Sean Lock Live DVD, is maybe a perfect intersecting point where he's still weird, he's still alternative, he hasn't his comedic voice hasn't been diluted a bit by just the massive amount of success he had. For me, that's my favourite of his live shows.
You mentioned that earlier. Do you think that's why?
Yeah, I think there's an edge to it. And he does things where it extends more in an improvisatory way that his panel show stuff was, where he doesn't feel like he can't go with the riffs that he's coming up with. Yeah. Like, there's a bit where he engages in a play fight because the AA are servicing a woman's car instead of his. The premise is a little shaky. Anyway, and he just ends up in this cartoony fight with all these blokes that are attacking him, and he's going like...
It's the commitment to that bit where he's being, like, wrestled down, and he's, like, doing the full facial acting of, like, he's losing, he's going like, oh, and then, oh, and he, like, pushes back. Yeah. And we're all like, we understand the story of an action scene. Yeah. We're here.
Oh, it was joyous. It's so funny. And then he picks up the mic, and then he's just starts swinging it around, and then a look of fear comes into his eyes. He's like, I can't stop it.
I can't slow it down.
I can't stop swinging the mic.
I could be broken down 3 or 4 hours. Woman breaks down 100 yards up the road. Van goes straight to her. I think that's an outrageous way to treat men. What do you think we are? Think we can just, like, fend off attackers all night long? Biff! Don't worry about me. Whoa! Why, I oughta... More ammo!
This is what I want to see. I want to see him goofing around, being himself, not trying to deliver jokes, but making himself laugh, doing things that I know he is enjoying, you know?
I completely get it. I think, to play devil's advocate for a second, would you find those moments as funny if a show is wall-to-wall that? Would that level up the contrivance somewhat to the extent that, oh, this person's written that, you know? Like, when you watch Jordan Brooks, for example, and it is nothing but subversion, clowning, terrifying the audience, only doing something that he knows is deliberately off-putting and weird and playful and silly and living in moments for too long. You sit there and weirdly it has the opposite effect, and you go, oh, so none of this is spontaneous. And all of this is so meticulously crafted. Wow, you're a genius. I feel like those moments really sing true because there's like 3 of them in a show.
Yeah.
Right?
I suppose in the other shows, there's almost none.
It's very on rails.
Maybe one in Purple Van Man, there's the centaur riff, which feels the most like harkening back to that goofy, applying logic to something really weird, where he's saying, you know, what if you're a centaur, but your human half was facing the wrong way, so your horse half, and he's like facing the horse is there, and he applies all these logical steps to it about how you eat, and it's so funny because it's so goofy.
I think that's the thing, that rhythmically felt like his closer to that material. It felt like a bracket on the end of it when he said, you know, you're a centaur, but you're turned the wrong way, so you're facing backwards. That was the rhythmic end to that, and you could see he took a beat and then just went, where am I going? And that was enough for him to start interrogating the premise that he had and started playing in those spaces a bit more.
You know, human from there to there's human. Rest of you's horse, but you're facing the wrong way. Jesus Christ! Where are we going? Whoa, boy, whoa.
I don't get me wrong, I will him every time I watch him to play more, but then you have to remember people are paid £35 and they're in a 4,000-seater venue and something massive, and you're like, you have to be so clear to get everybody in that room on board with you to the point where playing might lose half the room suddenly. You know, like there's a sense of responsibility on his shoulders that must have been quite stifling to some extent.
And again, to tie it back to the panel shows, I think that's why he is that safety net. He's surrounded by comedians who can hone him and give him that shape and give him punchlines if he ends up going down a rabbit hole, which does happen quite a lot, where he ends up doing this big silly riff and it's kind of going nowhere, and then Jimmy or John leap in and they save him and they make the bit complete. But to do that on your own show where you're flying solo is a much bigger risk.
Imagine just trying to eat a bit of grass. You know, how difficult that would be. Oh, God, starving. You'd have to, both of you, have to lie down on your side on the forest floor, wouldn't you? Both of you have to lie down like that. And the horse bit would be there. And you'd lie there. Just for a little snack in the day, like nom, 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 nom.
I think the reason why I loved Sean on panels was that he could sneak written material. I'd believe it more as spontaneous.
Yeah, like he came prepped every week for 8 out of 10 Cats and countdown stuff.
Yeah.
But it never felt like you were launching into a pre-written bit. Like you watch Mock the Week and it was immediately notable when someone would just strut up to the mic and engage Club 20 mode.
Yeah.
It was bizarre.
Yeah.
And then every word out of Sean Locke, you just bought that it was the man in the pub just going like, you know, another thing about geese. Like it would just suddenly come into his head.
At least my theory on it is that there were moments of genuine improv.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
And riffing, and then that lifts the written stuff. And you can see he's really crafty, actually. Like he is not crafty usually.
And actually, Sean Locke's a good comedian.
He's actually clever, yeah. But he'll go on an improvised riff, and then he'll find a way to couch a bit of material from his specials into it, and then he'll go back into the improv thing. So it's really masterful, actually, to engage in something spontaneous and then go like, you know what, I can just chip in here to boost the whole thing, these couple lines, stick that in, return to the improv, and then you're just like, he's a genius. How did he come up with all that off the top of his head? The thing I wrote about it, which, and follow me with this.
Come with me here.
Is that, you know in films how there's like practical effects and CGI?
I do.
And how they say, if you're doing a bunch of effect shots, you should do a practical effect and then a CGI effect next to it, because your brain has bought the practical effect, so then your mind is ready to just believe whatever CGI they throw at it.
I love this so much. This is how my brain works. Yeah, this is exactly it.
But it's what Locke, because it's just like practical, improv, riff, and then the written stuff, and you're just like, you go with it. Even though that's fake, if you look at it in isolation, and that's real, but it all feels real.
It all feels real. It all feels real.
It all feels real. Master Luke.
Jesus. Was that meant to be Yoda?
I don't know what I'm doing. Cockney.
It's just a random...
It's just the Loch-ness is just like, when he does that Madonna bit, but he's just like, I can't do American accents, so she's just Australian. And then he's just like, all right then, you bloody rooster.
Straight.
Come in then, Sean. And he's like just crab walking across the stage.
And you get to a hotel suite in LA, knock on the door. Inside, it's just pitch black darkness. And all you can hear is Madonna scampering about. All right, Sean! Have you come to get surprised, Sean?
Something that I do want to touch on very briefly before we have to wrap up is how much of a physical performer he actually is. He unfairly gets this reputation as a deadpan comic, and he's not in any way. He's so alive. His face is moving all the time. His voice is fluctuating. He's doing crazy stuff. His body is always in motion. But it's because his resting face is that. They're like, oh yeah, no, it's the deadpan guy. And then every bit is him lunging and doing weird elastic stuff with his body. Like, every bit I feel like that needs energy in the lift, he is using his body to push it through. Like, when he's almost feeling like the writing isn't, like, not good, but as in, like, it's not got the joke energy you need to get to the next level, his body just does it for him.
The audience reads the book by its cover. They see Sean with that depleted expression. He can use that as the baseline, even when he's extremely wacky and whatever.
He's setting expectations on first impressions so early.
Yeah.
He's going out with the dad from Cloudy with a Chance of Meatball's brow, like down, just down like that. So every is this complete defiance of expectation and a joyous surprise. You're right, he's set a baseline.
Yeah.
And every tangent off it feels like a little bit of magic.
Yeah.
That's what I'm not doing. I'm not doing that in my comedy whatsoever. Within my first minute, I have 6 different baselines, and they're all wrong. I need a consistent baseline to return to so that tangents feel concrete and real.
He was breeding spiders, and he was just up, hoping that they mate.
Imagine what the spider Kama Sutra's like, all those legs. How many different positions they can get into.
They can hold themselves up with webs, can't they?
When I'm watching panel shows and I feel like comedians are there, they've written the material and they're waiting to insert their material into the certain bit. They're like, I've written these jokes, I'm ready to go. Sean had this beautiful balance of knowing when to do written material, but it never escaped him that he's performing in a panel show, that the things he's doing are funny. And things that stuck out to me are like when he would beep the buzzer too long. Like all these like little meta things.
Yeah.
And there's where he's asking Jimmy for statistics and he goes, what's number... tell me number 5, Jimmy. And he waves his hand. Number 5, please, Jimmy.
He gets really arch with it for some reason. Yeah.
What are the other things
Are you
people
on your
say?
own?
What's number 5?
Okay, so
Tell me number 5, Jimmy.
But it's all these little funny moments where he's really alive in the moment and he's not settling for just doing his material.
Yeah.
He wants it to be off the cuff and he almost wants to derail himself and take himself into more interesting avenues. Watching this back, I didn't quite get this right. It's bugging me, so I thought I'd have another crack at it. Sean had an awareness of using the stage and his environment to his advantage. These things seem simple, but it takes a huge level of comic skill to realise that asking for more mead or getting Jason to have a buzzer off or any number of in-the-moment things are way funnier than a piece of written material.
Fingers on buzzers, 2 more things still to get. What do you think, Sean?
Can I have some more mead? To King Henry IV!
We can't trust him with a bowl. But look at how your hair's gone That's after all you've had is 1 glass. You already look as if you're one of the guys making Joe look good in a Wetherspoons.
Other comedians felt so on rails compared to Sean, like they were waiting to slot their prepared material into the conversation, or they felt they could only be funny in a wordy, written way. Sean knew that the things that were funniest were the things that didn't sound like jokes at all. Obviously, he could deliver jokes with the best of them, and his written material is of the highest caliber. But for me, it's the moments where he takes the show very, very off rails that stick longest in my memory. I've played it already, but that moment with the script songs is maybe my favourite Sean Locke moment ever. I've watched it 100 times, probably more.
Just anthems, really? You
You just chart your whole life growing up to a script.
Which other ones? I mean, those are two good ones. Which other?
There's I'll be up your pipe on a Saturday night. And you're doing a sensation. All those bloody classics. Script.
Not even Scottish. Doesn't make any sense at all.
And it's not because it's clever or well-worded or any number of things you usually associate with good comedy. It's because it is so dumb. Can you imagine Jimmy or John or any other comedian in the world doing anything like this? To say something so nonsensical and silly. This is why watching him made me think I could actually do comedy. John and Jimmy and countless other comedians have the rhythm and pace and sound of jokes hardwired into their brains. It seemed like a skill that needed to be learned. Sean made me realise that the way I was funny with my friends was just as viable, if not more so. Sean was just a mate in the pub. He was banter with your friends. It didn't need to be well worded or clever or intricate. It could be dead simple and silly and create chaos, beautiful, mad chaos.
This is what I would do if I was on The Voice.
Should we all turn away?
Yeah.
There's that
Let's
bit
all turn away.
Okay.
and they go next up, and then you hear them go,
Oh, yeah. He's coming.
and then you hear like, but what I'd do is this. and then I'd start. Spin round, Jack. You know, that means you want to manage me if you turn round. Somebody please! Make this floating through the chest.
That's a bloke.
The biggest thing, and it's something I only really touch on in the video, but thinking it over, it's so important to me and so important as to why it made Sean Lock so special. It felt innocent. I think maybe other comedians become too protected, or they build up their comedy muscles so much that they lose that spark of playfulness that makes us laugh so much in our day-to-day lives. Not to be cheesy, but it reminds me of this Robin Williams quote.
You're only given a little spark of madness. And if you lose that, you're nothing.
Sean kept it. Sean didn't have to be the smartest comedian in the room. He only had to be the funniest.
Been going for a really long time. It's a great show. It seems more fun to be on than some of the other panel shows.
Yeah, not as rehearsed.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like they allow more ad libs. I can never, could never tell.
Well, I've battled for that. I fought for that right from the very start because we used to edit it. They used to edit it just into sort of jokes that people had written.
The uncertainty about what sort of show it was, and the producers not necessarily trusting us, and the channel not necessarily trusting us, so they would cut together versions of it that were just quite harsh, and there was loads and loads of punchlines, basically, rather than actually the show that had been recorded. And it took quite a few years before they started to relax a bit about it and let it flow a bit more.
And now we've got it. It's a longer show now. But I used to fight and battle and rant at the producer to say, edit it, put this body, because Jimmy's very good off the cuff, and I like to mess around, and Jason can do it as well. And I think they've slowly edited it more in that way.
I've talked with a couple of other acts about this idea about the persona is kind of found in micro expression, not macro. And I feel like the window into a persona is in what you choose to do in the micro moment. So it's performance quirks, it's little word choice, it's little moments of breaking character. And you're right, that tell me number 5, Jimmy, tell me number 5 is this joyous moment where you work out how this man ticks. Of like, he does a weird little high-pitched voice, like when he needs to do like a little lift to a bit.
I would pick you up, but at the moment, I'm living every day as if it's my last.
When he needs to show you that he's this weird, wacky guy, he almost does it not in the material and the way it's being delivered. I think that's almost where his micro persona is kind of coming across.
And also just his pure commitment to abandoning jokes. Just like, there's one bit where it's like, what's the scariest gesture? And then John has a joke or something. And then Sean goes, well, no, the scariest thing you could do is really go like, or go like...
You're going to take the question literally. The worst thing to say to someone who's just been dumped is... What's going on there? Well, I'm just saying that's the worst thing.
That's pretty
If
bad.
I went to somebody and say, oh, she's lonely left me, and they just went...
There's a childishness and there's an innocence to it that I think really elevates it, where it's not trying to be clever.
Yes.
It's not trying to impress the audience. It's just trying to make them laugh in the same way you would try to make your friends laugh on the school ground.
Or down in the pub.
Yeah.
Top way to prove your masculinity.
Get the button first.
Is that one?
It's that one, yeah.
I was going like that.
Yeah, it's that or that. You can't do...
He is very much like bringing a shotgun to a rapier fight, where it's supposed to be all little Britishisms and barbed wit and, oh, very good, nice pun there. He just comes in like... like he's so blunt about it. And that's almost subversive in a way.
When he died, and a lot of people said his wit was incredible. He was very witty. And that never struck true to me. Not that he couldn't be witty, but it was wit in a way that we don't usually define it.
Yes, it wasn't, oh, how droll.
Yeah.
Oh, what an incredible use of the English language.
He chased me hither and thither. It was just like, be mad. And the wit came from invention and images and madness, but not pedantic words and sentence structure and like the Jimmy Carr thing of being very quick and very witty. It was, let me provide something. Let me provide some madness. That's my wit.
It's him, to use the improv term again, he's offering. He's always offering. You can almost kind of tell where the next generation of comedians who tried to fill that void were successful in how many people got their own compilations on YouTube. And I think the only person to fill the Sean Lock void for a while was when Acaster was reliably doing panel shows. He was always the guy that, regardless of what was happening, would make the big offer and gesture, cause some chaos, and sit back and let it happen. And that's why he's the one that had all of the clips made of him, right? There's a reason why, as great a comic as he can be in his own right, there's no, like, best of Mickey Flanagan on 8 out of 10 Cats, because he's not doing the offers, he's not being the inspiration, and he's not someone that people are being gravitating towards. They're not being drawn to like Locke was. I think what Acaster did on those shows is kind of similar. But then since then, I don't know who we have.
It's all witties.
Yes, it's all the bloody witties.
It's all the witties. Here's the funny things I've written, and here they are.
Yeah.
But there's no one going like, your witty things are stupid. This is what would really happen. This is what's funny. This is what takes it back to the pub, as opposed to like the poncy posh people.
Yes, who want to make it a Radio 4 editorial.
I did see the two guys that drove on the canal this week. You see
Yeah,
that?
great, wasn't it?
Do you know, the best thing about the story, so it was the guys, they got their car, whatever it was, a little tiny Citroen, they drove it along a canal and it went into the water and it reported that they both made it out alive, and so did the dog. They took a dog.
Maybe the dog was driving. That's why they're on the canal. You know, sometimes you go to your dog, go on, you have a go. He's trying to tape his paws to the wheel. I'll do the gears, don't worry about the pedals.
But just to close...
Close off the lock. Lock it down.
Lock it down. As you said about Sean Lock offering, he was always the inspired comedian, the comedian who had a really funny idea to shoot up, into the stratosphere and let all the other comedians pick it apart or comment on it or do their lines. But with him gone, it feels like we're missing the inspiration. We're missing the gust of wind from which everything else could flourish.
I can't believe we're finally talking. I've been following you for fucking years.
What are you doing there, out of interest?
Just
driving
walking
an
a dog.
old-fashioned tram. Forklift. John's in a forklift. She's in Lidl. He's stacking the shelves in Lidl.
So, Rachel, presumably before you got married, you were in bars picking up dudes. How would you...
I always talk to people with dogs. Because if you want to cuddle the dog, you generally have to ask, don't you?
It's amazing how much people will talk to you if you throw beer in a dog's face. They'll talk quite loud to you. If you just throw a pint of beer in a dog's face,
People start talking to you. They can first they say, we go, what's it doing?
And then you say conversation starter.
Yeah. Fancy the chat. And they say, fancy the chat. And I think there's something wrong with the taps in here. Barman, you need to change the barrel. And then you're off, everybody's chatting.
Shall we call the police? Shall we get help?
Usually the conversation is, I'm blind and now my dog is drunk. Brilliant.
Yeah. If you're talking about something and you say, you mention, like, their mother and they go, my mother's dead, you go, oh, just... Yeah, the dog's face.